45,000 men faced each other under the auspices of a tremulous thunderbolt and the light of a harvest moon. They were to be the largest belligerent forces to ever assemble on English soil. After just one evening's conflict, the fields of Long Marston were to be stained with the blood of 4,000 men. King Charles I sustained one of the most crippling defeats of the Civil War. Indeed, the outcome of Marston Moor was to pivot the control of the north of England unequivocally towards the parliamentarians. Its importance as a set-piece battle should not be underestimated. Historians such as Peter Young claim that it heralded the downfall of the king and the birth of our modern parliament. The battle was also to make and break the reputations of two of the most prolific figures of the First Civil War, Oliver Cromwell and Prince Rupert of the Rhine. The latter, hitherto the battle, was deemed to be invincible, and parliamentarian soldiers shuddered in his wake. Following the battle, he was drenched in ignominy and is poignantly remembered to have cowered in a bean field following his army's annihilation. On the other hand, Cromwell emerged rather controversially as the architect of one of the parliamentarians' most glorious victories. In early 1644, York, England's second city, lay besieged by 28,000 parliamentarian troops. The besieging was difficult due to the city being defended by a continuous circuit of Roman and medieval walls, not to mention its natural fortifications in the River Ouse and the smaller River Foss. This made encirclement almost impossible. The garrison itself was well supplied with provisions and was fully manned after the arrival of the Marquis of Newcastle's Northern Army on the 18th of April. Meanwhile, Prince Rupert hurried south to a council of war at Oxford, the royalist capital, on the 25th of April 1644. After the council disbanded, Rupert went north to assist the Marquis of Newcastle at York. Rupert hoped to raise the siege of York and rejoin the king before the summer was out. Prince Rupert marched from Shrewsbury on the first stage of the York March on the 16th of May. With him were 3 cavalry regiments, 5 regiments of foot and a regiment of dragoons. On the 23rd they were joined by Lord Byron, with 4 regiments of horse and 4 of foot at Chester. In order to secure a crossing of the River Mersey, Rupert stormed the parliamentarian outpost of Stockport on the 25th. He then skirted around the well-fortified town of Manchester and advanced on Bolton. Shortly after, Lieutenant General George Goring and Sir Charles Lucas joined Rupert's march at Bury with 5,000 of the Marquis of Newcastle's cavalry. Rupert then swiftly marched to Wigan, a town with royalist allegiances, and from there launched an assault on Liverpool. By this point, most of Lancashire was under royalist control. On the 19th of June, Rupert received an ambiguous dispatch from King Charles I, ordering him not only to lift the siege of York but also to defeat the Scotch Covenanters and parliamentarians in the area. As Rupert approached York, he deployed his cavalry in a line and sighted the parliamentarians. They fell for Rupert's ploy and met his cavalry screen at Marston Moor. He then force-marched the bulk of his army in an arc behind the parliamentarians, and then moved to retrieve York. Rupert, being a vanguard of confidence and impetuousness, decided to take the fight to the parliamentarians at Marston Moor. Rupert's plan was to launch a surprise dawn attack on the parliamentarian rear. He immediately sent orders to troops defending York to join him on Marston Moor. However, the troops were beleaguered from the lifting of the siege and the Marquis of Newcastle was reluctant. The element of surprise was so lost, his men didn't start to arrive until 5 p.m. The two armies deployed in a fairly conventional order of the day. The royalist centre consisted of 10,000 foot soldiers and dense formations of pikemen. They were flanked by horse on each side, Byron in command on the right wing and Goring on the left. Prince Rupert commanded the reserve at the rear. Both wings were of similar size, approximately 7,000 horse each. However, the parliamentarian infantry outnumbered the king's forces by almost 2 to 1, 21,000 men to 11,000. Despite the two armies facing each other, Rupert decided not to engage. He dismounted and enjoyed a smoke of his pipe and some supper. The Roundhead zealously seized the opportunity, and Cromwell and a sea of infantry to his right took up the middle ground. Fairfax joined them on the far right, and Cromwell was the first to charge. He caught Byron completely by surprise. During the calamitous engagement, Cromwell was wounded in the neck and left the battlefield. However, the Royalist cavalry had begun to rout. Rupert's attempts to regain the initiative were ruined by Scotch Covenanters who launched a decisive cavalry charge. Rupert had his man flung from under him and was forced to hide to evade capture. Despite this overwhelming victory on the left, Roundheads were losing ground to Cavaliers in the middle and on the right, where a ditch was impeding movement. Fairfax, in a feat of bravery, charged through the Royalist ranks to inform Cromwell of the Roundheads' unfavourable position. Cromwell seized the initiative, wheeled round and smashed into the back of the Royalist infantry. Only Newcastle's Whitecoat Regiment, the Lambs, continued to fight, and even they, after hours of brutal fighting, were finally cut down by the Ironside onslaught. In some respects, Marston Moor was decisive, yet the Civil War was to drag on for another 4.5 years. The Royalists were to find themselves asphyxiated by an ever-shrinking area of support.